And now, the Rusty Stubblefield for President show, featuring world-renowned raconteur and unemployed auto mechanic, the Reverend Rusty Stubblefield, sharing his unhinged views about politics and religion as the United States of America approaches the celebration of its 250th anniversary as one great nation under God.
I'd like to thank y'all for listening to my show. I'd like to thank y'all for listening to my show. We's all got a point of view. I like sharing mine with you. Thank y'all for listening to my show. Rusty Stubblefield for president.
Howdy, y'all, and welcome to the Rusty Stubblefield for President show. As you probably know by now, I ain't really running for president. Heck, I wouldn't be elected as dog catcher of Hog's Head Holler even if there's no one running against me. I was just happy to be preaching my weekly sermons at the Church of Our Lady of Original Sin and continuing my search for a job as an auto mechanic. This week, I went on an interview for a job at the local tire barn. But when they asked me to inflate all 4 tires on a car all at once, and I took to putting my lips to the car's exhaust pipe and blowing as hard as I could, they told me they wasn't interested in hiring me. Oh well, maybe something'll come up next week. Until then, I'll keep scratching my lug nuts. Well, anywho, this past week, there's been lots of different ideas rolling around in my head, and I like to spitball a few of them with y'all today. So here's some of what I've been thinking about. When I was listening to my favorite podcast last week, you know, the Conflation Station, they talked about a feller they called Infinity Man. They said that paleontologists discovered a man who claimed to be the 4th son of Adam and Eve, and that he was found living in a remote cave in the Himalayas. When scientists found him, he proclaimed that he was Infinity Man. Them there scientists believe that Infinity Man is the first person on this here planet to achieve immortality. They estimate he's over 1 billion years old. Now, being a God-fearing man and a true believer, I had to peel back the onion a bit to see if this story was for real, or if it was pure, unadulterated BS. So here we go off to the races. According to the Holy Scripture, in that book they's called Genesis, while Adam and Eve was gallivanting naked around in that there Garden of Eden, they's had plenty of time to raise 2 sons whose they'd named Cain and Abel. As an aside, from all the pictures I've seen of Eve, she was a real good looker. So I can see why that Adam feller took to procreating with her enough times to make a couple of sons. Well, anywho, the older brother Cain, the bad son, when he growed up, he took to a sinning and killed his younger brother Abel, the good son. Now, after Cain smote his brother dead, Adam and Eve were stricken with grief so bad they took to a procreating again to replace they's loss. As I said before, based on all them pictures of Eve, Adam must have had a thoroughly enjoyable experience procreating with her. So they's had a 3rd son whose they named Seth. According to the Holy Scripture, they's had some daughters too, so they's could get a head start on multiplying the human race. Back in them there prehistoric caveman-like days, incest was blessed in the Bible. Now, while Adam and Eve was frolicking in they's garden, God was also a busy getting his shit done according to the various duties and responsibilities stated in his job description. After he finished creating heaven and earth and creating Adam and Eve, he had plenty of downtime. And because he was a little bored watching Adam and Eve procreating, God thought he'd spice things up a bit. And he created another man in his own image, just like Adam, and he named this man Merrill. You know, like they pronounce Meryl Streep, but most people pronounce his name Merle, like that there country singer Merle Haggard. Well, anywho, the difference between Merrill and Adam was that Merrill was a black dude, you know, just like Jesus was. and he lived in a different neighborhood than that there Garden of Eden separate from Adam and Eve. Well, as the scripture tells us, one day while Eve was down in Merrill's neck of the woods, she met up with him, and it should come as no surprise, based on Eve's good looks, that the two of them went to procreating with each other. When God found out about it, he done smote Merrill dead in his tracks for a sinning, 'cause he knew Eve was married to Adam. At the time, God was the only one around, so he officiated they's wedding. God of smoten Merrill laid the biblical foundation for that there seventh commandment mentioned in the book of Exodus, saying, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." You see, God was thinking about adultery way before he gave Moses the power to commence them 10 plagues on them there Egyptians. Today, them Egyptians are so damn busy keeping out the migrants from Gaza, they's forgot all about them 10 plagues. Anywho, God made Eve bear the burden of her sin by making her carry this child to term. According to the book of Genesis, in or about September of that year, it took Eve 3 days in labor to birth a male child. And as it says in the good book, that's why we still celebrating a 3-day weekend for Labor Day today. Now, because there was so much procreating going on between himself and Eve, Adam believed this baby boy come from his own seed, but he was mistaken. Adam knew not of Merrill, so he had no reason to believe the child was not his own, although the fact his son was dark-skinned did raise a few eyebrows with they's neighbors. Adam and Eve named this, their fourth man-child, Infinity, to symbolize that the child was a product of they's everlasting love. But one day, during one of them their FaceTime conversations between God and Adam, God told Adam that Infinity was not his son, and that Infinity was born out of wedlock to Eve by a black man named Merrill. Once hearing this, Adam asked God to banish the man-child he and Eve named Infinity and ship him off to the Himalaya mountains. God obliged Adam's request, and that is where the man-child Infinity has lived ever since the beginning of time. Now, before I goes any further, it's time to take a minute for a little musical interlude. I knows you all want to hear me sing, but this week I asked my friends to stop by to share some of they's talents with you. They's a vocal duo who goes by the names of Tarzan and Jane. Tarzan, he's a tenor, and you guessed it, Jane's one heck of a soprano. When Tarzan and Jane gets to singing, it makes me think of what Adam and Eve must have sounded like when they was procreating. Together, they's going to be singing a love song entitled Let Me Go, written by that world-renowned composer fellow E. Dude X, and performed alongside the Electric Glove Orchestra. After they's done, I'll be back to finish my indoctrinating y'all with the rest of my sermon. My, how I love to hear Tarzan and Jane sing. I feel so much more relaxed and in tune with the world after listening to the music of E. Dude X played by that there Electric Glove Orchestra. Now, let's fast forward a few billion years. Just 2 weeks ago, paleontologists discovered Infinity Man in them there Himalaya mountains. In trying to communicate with him, these paleontologists found out that Infinity Man could speak several languages, including English, Hebrew, and Creole. When they scientists asked him his name, Infinity Man said, "I's Infinity Man, and I's been raised by a family of snow leopards." When they scientists asked Infinity Man how he got to the Himalayas, he repeated the very same story I's just told you. This was the first time in the history of mankind that events in the Bible was corroborated from a primary source. Anywho, their scientists put Infinity Man on a plane and took him back to the US of A to that there Walter Reed Hospital for one of them MRI exams. It just so happened to be the same place and same doctors that performed the MRI on President Trump. At a press conference held just after Infinity Man's MRI test was made public, them doctors said Infinity Man's MRI was perfect, even better than Trump's MRI. Later that day, I heard that on the Fox News network, that Trump feller said no effing MRI could ever be better than his. Trump questioned whether them doctors gave Infinity Man a cognitive test. In addition to the MRI, doctors removed a bone from Infinity Man's rib cage to do some carbine dating. Not only were radiologists able to determine that Infinity Man was approximately 1 billion years old, but miraculously, they was also able to spontaneously clone one of Infinity Man's ribs to create a fully formed adult woman who was the spitting image of that beautiful Eve herself. Them scientists named her Eve 2.0. DNA testing showed that Infinity Man's DNA did not match Adam's DNA. This proved that Adam was not Infinity Man's father. If this is beginning to sound like one of them Maury Povich episodes to y'all, I couldn't agree more. Needless to say, I don't care what them there scientists say. I's a God-fearing man and believes what it says in the Bible 100%. Infinity Man had to be Adam's son. As a result of a complete physical examination, doctors at the Walter Reed Medical Center determined that Infinity Man is and will continue to be immortal. As a God-fearing man myself, I does not believe that any human can be immortal. It just ain't possible. They's heaven and they's hell, and we's all going to go to one place or another when we's dead. Some folks, they's already in a living hell today. They's call them folks Trump supporters. But if them there doctors say Infinity Man is immortal, it must be true. Y'all can't argue with a doctor. Having a medical school education, those doctors sure know they stuff. Personally, I believe in religion and science and have reached the conclusion that both a spiritual and a scientific explanation for man's existence can be true at the same time. You know, there was a time when I was even considering achieving immortality. You ever hear of that there baseball player who used to play for the Red Sox named Ted Williams? Well, after that there Williams feller died, he had his head frozen cryogenically. By the way, that there Williams feller was the last pro baseball player who batted .400. Now there's an accomplishment a feller can be proud of. Well, when I first heard about that there cryogenics, I thought they was referring to surgery to fix a person's tear ducts. But after I heard about the Williams feller having his head put in the deep freeze, I now stands corrected. Today, after thinking things over a heap, given the sad state of this here US of A is in, I's not so sure that I's want to live forever no more. Maybe I'll just move to Canada, or maybe even them there Himalayas. To be continued. Well, as I say at the end of each of my weekly sermons, if you and me put our pretty little heads together, we may still be able to figure out how to get this here world back on track. Thank y'all for listening.
I'd like to thank y'all for listening to my show. I'd like to thank y'all for listening to my show. We's all got a point of view. I like sharing mine with you. Thank y'all for listening to my show. Rusty Stubblefield for president.